And basically, I'll start with Jay expects to be late, if he makes it, hopefully. And Heather Soroka will not be joining us tonight, and Heather Lemieux will also not be joining us tonight. So, so we'll save up some of that discussion for her for next week. In the meantime, we can pick on Karen Brochu, who is attending tonight. So, and with that, I forgot to open the Zoom script, but I will say that this meeting of the Finance Committee is being recorded and is being broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access, and I believe it's being streamed to the Facebook page for Lunenburg Public Access. Any votes that we take at this meeting will be taken with roll call, although the only vote that looks like it might be up tonight will be about the meeting minutes. And with that, I will also say that we will have a public comment time at the end of the meeting. So if somebody did want to make a public comment but was not able to participate through the Zoom meeting, my email will be open, and I will check it before the close of the meeting if you want to make a public comment there to be read. And that address is tburchield@lunenburgonline.com. And with that, Peter, I know you had a public comment.
Yes, I did. Thank you for recognizing me. I just wanted to note the passing of Bruce Smith yesterday. For those of you who did not know Bruce Smith, I believe he was a lifelong resident of Lunenburg, if not his life, certainly my life. He was a original member of the Lunenburg Blue Knights football team back in the early 1960s, and coached that team as an adult for many years, including the years in the 80s when I played, and for a good 15 years after that under Coach Diamantopoulos. But more importantly than that, I think for Lunenburg, Dave Passios mentioned last time we met, in talking about the passing of Mr. McMillan, that his generation of Lunenburg youth were raised by a number of families in Lunenburg that kind of all took part in responsibility for the kids in Lunenburg. And for my generation, who grew up in the 80s, Bruce Smith was part of I would say, a network of dads in Lunenburg who you would see at every school event, every sporting event, in the audience if they were not coaching, and many of them were. Names like Lamoth, Giovino, Membrino, Rogers, Powell, Nash were part of that community when I was a kid. And he had a son that was a classmate of mine in 1990, another son who graduated, I believe, in 92. And a number of stepchildren as well. And just wanted to acknowledge his passing, appreciate everything that he did for me and for Lunenburg, and wish his family all the best.
Thank you. Any other public comment from Carol Archambault? Do you want to unmute yourself? Okay.
Oh, I unmuted myself. Thank you. As many of you are aware, the school committee chairperson is the sole spokesperson for the school committee. This statement is being shared with the permission of the school committee chair. At the last finance committee meeting, there were many comments involving the school district's remote model. I wish to clarify the remote model the Lunenburg Public Schools will be operating with as schools open this fall, with most students participating in a hybrid model. Any student that is registered to attend school remotely will be taught by Lunenburg Public School educators. All educators will receive additional training in remote education, meet regularly with their hybrid teaching peers, teach to the established Lunenburg curriculum, and develop a classroom community within the remote cohort. There are rare cases where a high school student may select a course that other remote students have not selected, such as an upper level foreign language course. In those cases, the school district will arrange for that course to be taught through Educare at a cost of $200 per student per course. Otherwise, the school district will teach all remote students. As was brought up by Finance Committee members at the last meeting, students may choose to attend another school through school choice or choose to homeschool. That is a decision each family needs to make. All remote registrations need to be in by tomorrow, August 28th, so we can adequately plan for each student. Students who register remotely are welcome to switch to the hybrid model at the end of each quarter if they so desire. I hope this clears up any questions you may have regarding the remote learning plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Any other public comment from anybody on the committee?
Carrie, can I?
Question for, I'm sorry, Peter, I didn't see your hand over
Yeah.
on your face. Yeah.
No worries. I just wanted to add, since it is not on the agenda, and I know that committee reports will come up. In follow-up to our last meeting, I did send an email to the superintendent about some of the cost-related issues associated with school choice as well as online learning. And she acknowledged my email and basically said that, you know, they're still in the process of calculating based on the information, the aforementioned information that Mrs. Archambault mentioned as a result of the survey, and that they would be, she would be communicating with us down the road as these numbers become clearer in terms of any financial impacts. One thing that I did not realize, or it didn't occur to me when we were speaking last week, is that there is some potential negative impact as well with relation to the enrollment. And potentially if a high number of students choose to homeschool in particular, that would perhaps decrease our enrollment to the point that it could affect us negatively in the future in outbound years and cherry sheets and that sort of thing. Again, not something that's calculable at this point, but something that we need to be aware of and ask about in the future.
Good, thank you. Actually, this would probably, Carol, I'm just going to ask you if you mean to still have your hand up, and if you do, I'm happy to recognize you.
No, I have to figure out how to lower it. There we go.
Okay.
You've all been there.
All right. Then with that, it seems as good a time as any to move right into any other committee reports that anybody might have that they want to share at this time. John?
Well, I reached out to the police chief and fire chief a couple of days ago and just updated their how they were doing relative to a plan. And there has been in the police department a little bit of a COVID effect in that in really two ways. They when the police go to answer and respond to a call, if there is a good chance that they've been exposed to COVID, the officers get tested, and then they sequester for 2 to 3 days. What happens is the police department puts other officers on overtime and takes up the slack for those days. Now, there's only been 3 instances, 3 officers that have gone through this. But because COVID is an open-ended issue right now, frustratingly, you know, it probably will happen again. And the only other thing he emphasizes is that they are getting, beginning last month, they were getting an increase in calls, particularly in the evening. The calls are either neighbor to neighbor conflict or else conflicts within the households. And so that's just keep it to mind. So, and the fire are less involved with COVID. And the only thing this is an update is that the Chief Sullivan expects to get the ladder truck in engine 4 should be by the end of this month or sometime in September. And then he's anticipating placing an order for the medical cabinet, the defibrillator, and related to the defibrillator is paramedic training. Now here's a wrinkle again with the COVID effect, in that the local hospitals are not yet going to be open for training because they're working with in the COVID protocol. So he's got to wait for that. It shouldn't be a long time, but I'll let you know. That's it.
Great, thank you. There was one question that I have before moving on to Chris. In terms of the COVID costs, or the types of COVID costs that they're recognizing in terms of police overtime, are they recoverable through the COVID?
Oh, gosh, I'm glad you said that. Two things. First of all, I breezed through the PPEs. Let me get to that. After that, the COVID overtime costs, I don't think are recoverable. However, the increased PPE investment that we've had to make for them is going to be covered 100% through two funds, the CARES Act and the FEMA Act. FEMA is, I think, 75% in COVID, and the CARES Act is 25%. The issue there is that the reimbursements have not yet come. He knows they're going to be reimbursed, but it's a cash flow issue, and that it's not yet. So he's at an expense outlay, and he's waiting for the reimbursement to follow.
Okay. Chris?
No, I was going to ask that question on whether the overtime was recoverable.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Yeah, two quick reports on committees. Parks Commission met on Tuesday, ended up basically being Karen Menard and myself, as we are still a 3-member board, and one member was not available for the meeting Tuesday evening. The discussions based on the agenda items developed a couple of action items that the chair is going to work on. Our biggest discussion was about Marshall Park and what direction we want to take a plan for that park. We started over the next meeting or so, we're hoping to pull together a list of what the commission sees the park looking like after a complete renovation, possible uses, changes of use, so on and so forth. And then we're going to go to the public and tell them that, okay, this is what we've come up with what's there. I think we should be rehabbed, what could be added. What do you think? And ask for public input. And then start to develop a master plan and start sourcing funding. One of the things that we both agreed about was that so far we're not seeing grant monies for these types of projects drying up, and it doesn't look like it's going to dry up for the foreseeable future. There's opportunities that Open Space is aware of that might be able to help fund this, earmarks, and just flat out grants that can be applied for parks improvements and things like that. So we're pretty optimistic, and we're going to keep this ball rolling now that we've got it started. And my comment was that I hope we have a completely renovated and very usable 23-acre Marshall Park within 5 years.
Wow.
That's pretty much it for parks. TC Passios has met once since our last meeting. We had some discussion back and forth about the inviting or soliciting other community groups in town. Our chair made a public comment at the beginning of the BOS meeting 2 weeks ago or a week ago Tuesday. To that effect, inviting the public and any other boards to please contact the committee, or specifically, I think they should be going through our chair. And we will be taking a look at that. We did get a further update on where the engineers and architects are at. They're starting to pull together a fairly good picture of what the building condition is, and soon they're going to start putting some rough numbers to things that no matter how the building is configured, they're not going to change. The fact that the building needs an entire new roof in every aspect, that number can be calculated and won't change unless you tear down part of the building. So things are moving forward. I hope the community groups are satisfied over the next few weeks as we solicit their input, and we'll go forward from there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to lower Dave's hand because I get confused. At some point, I'll see it again, and I'll just get, okay. With that, and actually, it's not on the agenda, but when Chris let me know that I forgot to put the committee reports on, he had also brought up the notion of whether or not we had a rubric or anything that we used as a committee to make recommendations on building projects such as TCP or such as what's going to come up with any of the other buildings down the road. And I guess, Chris, if you want to just raise the question, we won't necessarily have much of a discussion on it tonight, but I'm happy to put it on the next agenda if people want to have a further discussion around this or think it ties into something else or is handled in another way. So.
Yeah, so I guess as the Finance Committee, we, make recommendations on the articles as they go forward that have budgetary impact. And I was just wondering if in the past, when the, high school, middle school came forward or any of these other building projects, if there was some kind of rubric or report or something that the Finance Committee came forward with to help the voters to decide, whether they support or don't support the article as written. So how will we discuss this as we gain information and ultimately vote as to whether we recommend or not recommend approval?
I think the debt discussion is certainly a portion of that, and the effects of debt on both the budget and the tax rates, as well as the downstream ramifications on fiscal policy. I think it's all kind of part of the same ball of wax. But I think that there's a whole other side of that discussion around the benefit side that are harder to enumerate. And I think your idea of a rubric is an interesting idea that may help in that discussion. I don't know. I kind of need to get my head around sort of the role of the Finance Committee and how far we go out in considering cost versus benefit. I mean, cost is a little bit clearer when you get to that stage, but I think that would be something that's worth exploring and discussing.
John?
Just I agree that, first of all, the idea of a rubric, Chris, really appeals to me. Secondly, it would help, at least in the data gathering section. A lot of things I've particularly been frustrated by the fact that when you're talking about replacing an asset, it's only exceptionally that we talk about the, say, cost savings relative to the operational costs. And I'm sort of criticizing myself here because I was in the role that could have pushed that forward. But I think just the process of putting together a rubric might help focus our attention on what questions to ask. So yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, then I'm not sure how best to frame the discussion. So, Chris, I think I'll just leave it to you to lead the discussion around that at the next meeting in terms of what your vision might be. And if everybody else wants to give some thought to what they think would be helpful when it comes to, and again, thinking in terms of when it comes time to vote to recommend or not recommend, what are the kinds of things that are running through your head aside from this much money? What are the other pieces of information that you think it would be helpful to have and weigh in on? But it's definitely an interesting idea, and it would be good to explore further. I agree with everybody else. Hi, Jay. I'm glad you made it.
Hello.
The only thing you've missed so far is other comments. So if you have one, you're welcome to chime in.
Oh, good.
Okay. And if you, the other thing we did cover as part of public comment was any committee reports. So I'll come back to you with that as well. Do you have any committee reports that you wanted to share tonight?
I don't. No.
I thought we lost you for a minute. You froze a little bit. All right. Then we'll move on with the agenda. And the next part of the agenda is the town manager or finance director report. And we do have the finance director with us tonight. So we'll go to Karen.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
How you doing, Karen?
Good. How are you? I don't have
too.
Hey, you know, I'm trying my best, trying to get FY20 closed, but I don't have too much to report. One thing that I did want to comment on is I do think that some of those overtime costs for the police department related to COVID would be reimbursable through FEMA and the CARES Act funding. I know that for the close of FY20, we had submitted some payroll expenses that were related to COVID and were overtime costs, and we haven't received a reimbursement from FEMA yet, but we have received some CARES Act money, and they did give us 25% of those costs. So I think that, I mean, it's not, so far it hasn't been a huge amount of money. I'm talking probably a total of maybe for FY20, probably total costs of $7,000 or so for the police and fire department combined. So it wasn't significant, but I do believe that it's eligible for reimbursement. And knows what's going to happen going forward and with those costs. I mean, they could escalate depending on what happens. So it's good to know that at least to the best of my knowledge, those costs are reimbursable through FEMA and the CARES Act. I am next Tuesday going to present the close of FY20 revenues and expenditures, but I did want to mention a few things to you regarding FY20, and that is that the revenues for FY20 exceeded estimates by 0.6% or a total of $267,291. Our expenditures were 2.8% less than what was budgeted, for a total of $1,207,219 in appropriation closeouts. That being said, our fund balance, our undesignated fund balance, which is the starting point for our free cash certification, is $644,000 higher than what it was at the close of FY19. So I believe that we will have a significant free cash certification once it's submitted for certification. Last year's certification of free cash, I was just looking at it. What did I do with it? I thought I wrote it down. Let me see if I can find it quick. last year our certified free cash was $1,107,694. And like I said, our closeout this year was $644,000 higher than what it was in the prior year. So I would assume that may translate almost dollar for dollar in the increase in our free cash certification.
Okay. Dave, you had a question?
Yeah, this strays a little bit from what Karen was just talking about, but I'd just like to ask a question because she is on the meeting tonight. Now that I've been appointed to be the representative on the capital planning committee, I read through every word that's on the capital planning's front page in regards to the bylaw and our responsibilities, so forth. And I was surprised to read, and I won't get it, I'll paraphrase it because I won't get it word for word because I don't have it in front of me. But it stated in there that because the capital plan was voted as a lump sum, money could be administratively moved anywhere within the capital plan without a vote of town meeting. In your recollection, has that ever been done?
We do not do that. I can tell you that now. If there were an item on the capital plan that exceeded the amount that was appropriated, if the department that requested the capital item had the ability to fund within their appropriations the difference, as long as it wasn't, $200,000 or something, I'm talking a very small percentage over what was budgeted, then we have allowed that to happen in the past, but we have never shifted dollars amongst the total capital plan.
Okay, that pretty much answers my question. It just shocked me that that is in there and the way it was worded, because it, when we vote at town meeting, we're given this list of projects and assume that, or actually through the capital planning process, there's dollar amounts tied to each project. But then in the bylaw, it says, well, it doesn't really matter what that number is because under the bylaw, as long as the lump sum is appropriated, that money can be divvied up anywhere and moved around administratively. I understand that you haven't done it, but it's in black and white in our bylaws.
It's pretty sad that I'm saying this, but I was not even aware that was in the bylaw. To me, that does not make any sense.
I think the only thing that would save a department from having to do is such as the DPW did for Wallace Park, and that is encumbering funds from the budget to cover an overage for the final project over there for the basketball courts. And it's really taking money from one place versus another more than anything anyway. I've just been trying to figure out how it would affect leftover funds at a closeout of the year. In that case, as you and I have spoken, those were both raise and appropriate funds either way, so it really didn't matter. But could there be an instance where more money, doing it one way versus another, would help roll more free cash into the next year or vice versa? That's been my thought process. That's all.
Well, if you had the ability to move the monies within the capital plan and use those monies rather than encumbering in the general fund, as was the case with the park department with the resurfacing of the court, then you would, if you have the ability to use the capital planning funds then and not the general budget, then you would have more free cash at the end of the year.
Okay. And it would be less restricted under our policies also, because more or less under our policy, once money is put into a capital project, we more or less keep it there. Even unexpended capital goes back into another capital project.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Peter?
Thanks. Karen, with respect to the unspent expenditures, at some point will we see an accounting of that, and in particular what wasn't spent?
I can give you, as a matter of fact, on Monday, I need to do the summary report that I need to present to the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday night. And I'm sure that once that is all put together, I can send the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen those reports so that you have them, so that you can see which departments closed out appropriations.
Yeah, in particular, I'd be interested to see, I would imagine a lot of this is COVID affected in one fashion or another, but some of it might not be. And, that stuff in particular, I think we just need to kind of think about as we're going into future year budgeting.
I would agree. I mean, a lot of it, I think, had to do with, I know the police closed out a lot of money, but I think that had to do with personnel issues because we had police that were still at the academy and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
We had appropriation closeouts in health insurance, but that's because things didn't, you budget anticipating things to happen and they don't necessarily happen the way that you thought. I know the school had a closeout of money. I'm trying to think of what the other the DPW had quite a bit of closeout as well. So, like I said, when I finish my summary report and it's ready to go to the board, I don't see any reason why the Finance Committee can't get those reports as well.
Okay. To your knowledge, has the 2020 busing issue been resolved yet? I don't recall that coming back to the Board of Selectmen. Do you know?
That is going to the board on Tuesday night.
Okay, so that'll be resolved one way or the other, and
Hopefully it'll be resolved on Tuesday. I can tell you that there were funds that were encumbered for both of the bus companies until the issue is resolved. So it's not any new monies that we have to come up with. There are POs that were encumbered for that purpose.
Okay. And this is probably more of a question to Terry, and it may be out of order here because I know that you've got a budget history discussion, but I'll raise it anyway, and if we want to move it, that's fine. I just want to make sure that we're not losing sight of the calendar for consideration, in particular of capital, but really all budget items going into fall town meeting. I'm in particular interested in some capital items that may need a different level of consideration, considering some things that are going on socially and politically, and I think we need to have a conversation around that.
Well, I will say that when we do get into the budget discussion, which we probably won't, I have a great deal of discussion tonight, but certainly the take that Heather seemed to present was that she's looking at pretty much until the discussion on Tuesday night with the Board of Selectmen, where they were planning to discuss budget priorities, that she's looking at her pre-COVID budget as what she would be looking to reinstate, given that. And she wasn't expecting too many changes based on, but that was a very short text message. And Karen, I don't know if you can speak any more to that, but the sense that I got from Heather's message was that she expects to be going back to her pre-COVID budget to bring those things forward and probably bring forward the capital plan that was there. I don't know if the capital planning committee has met at all in terms of addressing any different needs that may or even just revisiting the capital plan itself just to reprioritize or anything. I'm going to assume that their recommendation would be to go forward with what was initially put in as well and approved as well. Or actually, it wasn't really approved because it was kind of held back, so it would have to be approved again at town meeting, I would think, yes. So any of the things they did before, yeah.
I personally, and obviously I'm just a vote on the finance committee. I'm obviously not on the capital planning committee. But I think some of that needs to be reconsidered in light of certain things that are going on that may require capital. And the two areas that in particular I would like to see revisited over the next couple of months are body cameras in the police department. And at least if we're not going to deal with them shortly, what is the long-term plan? Where does this fit into our capital plan? And the other is an issue that came up in the school department, which I understand why the administration has kind of pushed it off, but it became apparent that in the future, if we find ourselves in a position where we want to broadcast from classrooms, and there are some legal issues around that, but everything is subject to change given the crazy world we're about to go in with hybrid learning. We don't really have the infrastructure to broadcast from classrooms to students learning remotely. And I would like to know what the cost would be to get us to the point that we have the infrastructure to do that.
Okay. I'm not sure how best to follow up with that. I don't know whether, because I'm not sure if Dave, do you know, does the Capital Planning Committee have any notion of meeting in advance of the special town meeting?
I've heard absolutely nothing so far.
Okay. Then it may be the most appropriate thing to do at this point would be, and Peter, I would just leave it in your hands to do if you wanted to just go ahead and send off an email to the town department heads regarding those two issues to see what their sense might be in terms of bringing that to the capital plan, since that's typically where they originate, unless you have a different way you'd like to go about it.
I don't. My reason for bringing it up is the process going into a special town meeting is unclear to me. So I'm raising the issue because I don't know what the process is. I raised two issues, that one of which has never been considered. The other has been discussed but not found its way into the list of priorities. And I think rapidly changing conditions are warranting a further discussion of those two areas.
Right, and the interesting thing too is I'm not sure that, and again, a lot of it also depends on the federal level, what they're doing with some of their discussions, but certainly the whole notion of the increased need for technology to address a lot of the remote learning issues has certainly, it may be something that will be attainable through federal or state funds down the road, but as a potential source of revenue. But
frankly, Terry, and this may come back for another statement of clarification from the school committee. What I'm looking for right now is just information. I mean, if it could be as simple as, what does it cost? And my reason for saying that is, at least with respect to the body cameras, we got relatively non-specific information from Chief Marino during his two presentations over the course of last year, although it did come up both times. And when the issue came up around the broadcasting to the school committee, there's a legal hurdle, which I understand, but it was also, there's a technical hurdle, we just can't do it, which I don't accept, we just can't do it. I want to know what the cost is of overcoming that hurdle. And with that information, I think that, people with goodwill on all the committees can determine if these things are something that need to find their way into a capital planning process, even an expedited capital planning process, if necessary.
Sure. Okay.
And also the IT issues may come into the other agenda topic on the file sharing options, because it may just mean we need to go to a more advanced platform.
Well, I think the file sharing is definitely a cloud related issue that I think we need to work through, and security issue. My understanding from what little I heard from the school committee meeting about the topic was that there's a bandwidth issue, which in my mind is easily surmountable. broadband bandwidth issue, but there's also an infrastructure issue in particular. Well, number one, they don't have the cameras in a lot of the classrooms to be able to do this, but there's also like a networking issue. We don't have the proper speed of switches and routers in Turkey Hill Elementary School, for example, right? And so, but to my knowledge, none of the actual work has been done to determine what the cost of overcoming that kind of thing is.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay. Then moving on to minutes. At the last meeting, we did see the minutes presented for July 23rd, which Heather had wanted to go back and make changes to. I have a note, and I'm not understanding my own notes now. Did we approve the meeting minutes of June 11th?
Yes.
Or were we? No.
Oh boy, I submitted them.
Okay, that's clear of that. Okay, I will go back and just double check at the meeting to see. For some reason, I had 6:11 and 7:23 satisfied.
Yeah, no, as I recall, but I had put them together in a group. But as I recall, we may want to come back to that because somebody hadn't read them or something like that. And
It's possible. I would, but at this point, I'm happy to take, if anybody wants to proceed with the July 23rd meeting minutes, I'm happy to take that up.
I move to approve the July 23rd meeting minutes as submitted. John has his hand up.
Yeah, John has his hand up, but he's muted.
You're muted, John.
I can't take him seriously when he's muted.
Well, first of all, I gotta tell you, I was sitting here not doing anything, not touching anything, and became muted. So I figured that my first contribution was so bad that you said, hey, I can do something about this. This is something I can do right away. Regarding the minutes, I had a couple of exchanges with email with Heather, the emails, and there were a few typos, a couple of substitution of words for clarity, and that I sent back to her. I sent back an email to her, I believe, on Monday or Tuesday, and haven't heard back yet. Perhaps perhaps she's since she's gone on vacation, she may not have gotten it. But I'd like to respectfully submit that we had to relook at them and hold off on approving them. I don't think there's any time. It's not time sensitive.
No. And she's not here.
Okay,
so
then do you want to withdraw?
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, then we'll have on the next meeting agenda the meeting minutes from. Well, I should go back to you, John. Were any of the changes material?
No, they were more like wordability. A couple there was at least one instance where there were two verbs that were the same, accomplished the same thing in the sentence. So I got rid of one of them. There were a couple of typos. In general, though, there was nothing substantive about the minutes that I found wrong. But I thought, geez, can't we just polish them up a little bit? It's a character flaw.
Okay. Okay. That's fine. I'm sure she preferred it anyway.
John, we need your attention to detail and Chris's attention to detail to overcome my and Dave Passios' bloviating.
Well, we'll be on because I learned a lot from it.
All right. So we'll just move right along then and go to, did people have a chance to take a look back at the budget information, and did anybody have any comments, questions, or discussion that they wanted to bring forward now, or do you want some more time to take a look at it and wait until after, since there's going to be a discussion at the Board of Selectmen meeting on Tuesday night about the budget priorities? Is that something that you want to wait for and then have a more in-depth discussion at the next meeting.
I guess and I think a detailed discussion at the next meeting is probably most appropriate since we don't have the town manager here. My only request would be, I'm the one that asked for the dashboard document, and it's proven to be a very useful document to me to kind of keep track of what we did and not necessarily why we did it, but at least what we did over the budget season. So my request would be through you, Terry, and through Karen to the town manager is that we don't lose this and we are able to refer back to it when we're determining what we're going to make whole in the fall.
Okay. Chris, did you find any of the information helpful, or is there more information that you feel would be helpful to you?
No, I did find it helpful. And, on the expenditure side, there's a lot of, additional firefighter, additional police officer being removed. So I guess that means keep level. I was interested in, do we have like a 5-year plan for what each of the, is that available for what?
Yeah,
each of the departments?
There's a 5-year forecast document that is published at the beginning of the year. Chris, is that what you're?
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that Chris is talking about the staffing plan that the police and fire put together for the 10-year, bringing them up to 24/7 coverage and paramedic status, and is that what you're looking for, Chris?
Yeah, and actually I was looking for it across all of the departments.
Okay.
DPW.
Well, there's not a staffing plan, there isn't, because that was the in terms of a staffing plan. But in terms of the 5-year forecast, as Peter was saying, yes, we have one of those that cover all the departments. But I'm not sure that there were staffing changes represented necessarily in the 5-year forecast. I know that there were plenty of requests.
If you recall, the school department had a ton of staffing issues in theirs, and it became an extremely controversial item. So I think that there's, I don't know if that's universal from department to department, but I don't recall. But I know that at least in the school department, there was a lot of information.
Yeah, no, there was. But I'm thinking back to the informal conversations like we had with Sue Doherty at the Council on Aging about wanting a dietitian, wanting like different types of things that she saw a need for. But I'm not sure they're represented in the 5-year forecast. That's what I mean.
Okay.
I just mean that in terms of a spelled out plan for putting in positions, the only one that I recall seeing was the forecast for the fire, for increasing like one firefighter each year, one police officer each year until they got to a particular number. And I believe if I can find it, I'll send you what I have on that, and I'll also send the 5-year forecast, which also had. And yes, you're right, Peter. Yes, because basically what the school department was identifying as their needs was definitely presented at the time of the 5-year forecast. And actually, maybe in the 5-year forecast there might be some discussion of it, but it doesn't show up in the spreadsheet with the numbers going forward out the 5 years in terms of the expenses, I don't believe. So, but yes, we can get that to you.
Good. That would be helpful.
Which actually we'll just roll that right into the next discussion about the file sharing options. And I'll probably, since I know that you were having some discussions with Steve Malandrinos, if you wanted to share some of that information.
Yeah,
If you guys wanted to.
Yeah, so it seemed the options came down to that he recommended, either Google Drive, OneDrive, or moving from a OneDrive to a SharePoint. Ultimately, in my view, going to a SharePoint would be ideal because it's a central repository. You got all the, right controls, access controls, etc. OneDrive seemed to be a little bit more on the individual to set up an account and then publish something and manage who sees things. So I feel like SharePoint gives you more benefits to that. Steve said, though, the one thing with SharePoint is I think it's like $6 per user per month. So, but in the grand scheme of things, I feel that that's not a lot of money, really. And I think having all the data in one spot would probably help even in the day-to-day operations of people that are, emailing and requesting files and looking for things, even on the town side. So, and that's kind of where I was getting into the prior discussion on the infrastructure changes. If we were looking holistically across all of Lunenburg to include school department and the municipal side, if we went to some of these IT options, maybe it's no longer $6. Maybe you get a little bit of a savings on that. I did set up a OneDrive with my Lunenburg Online account. I'm easily able to share things between my desktop and, I have it on my iPad. I'm looking at it on my iPad now. So, it's then in the cloud. Again, the only problem with that is it seems to be more of then I have to make that available to others. And additionally, there would be a cost if anyone goes over a certain amount of gigabytes of storage. So it would probably be town manager that would ultimately be publishing a lot of information. And, she may end up being above that and would need to pay a little bit to get to maybe a terabyte of storage.
Do you know what that threshold is, Chris?
I think he said 6 gigabytes.
That's not that much.
Yeah, and maybe I have it wrong. It's all online.
Yeah.
I had problems with Google Drive because I have a Google Drive, and my computer starts to get confused if I'm using my personal one or I'm using my town one, and it kind of starts to get embedded into your Microsoft operating system to begin with. Additionally, the other problem I have with OneDrive is I share computers with my girls, and their school uses OneDrive. So it sometimes gets confused whose license is being used on that as well. That's why I personally think the SharePoint would be the best solution. I mean, there would be some cost on it, but in the end, I don't think it's astronomical cost. But at a minimum, we could start with OneDrive and probably move to a SharePoint if everyone was interested in it.
There is a there is a threshold cost with OneDrive as well. It's very inexpensive, but I happen to have a OneDrive account that I pay for, and I don't recall what the threshold is, but I've exceeded it. My personal opinion on this is whatever it is, it's just something that we have to have our own unique logons to, and there has to be some record keeping associated with it so we know who did what. And SharePoint does that very well. But I don't have a strong opinion that it should be any one of the three. SharePoint is by far the most elegant of the three, but it's also the most expensive.
Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking on SharePoint is it does let you get into things like workflow. It lets you set up calendars, and as you go through a budgeting process, you can kind of lay that all out and see how you're progressing towards it. So
these meetings would run themselves, and then you wouldn't need a chair.
Yeah, that's SharePoint Plus.
SharePoint Plus, okay. Yeah, I mean, basically, if the only question or concern that I would have would be that I can see it as helpful for sharing information. I don't think that it would be anything that we would be able to do anything to. So basically, it doesn't necessarily need the capacity for us to be able to work on a document because we're not. I would think that would violate open meeting law. But I don't know. But I would be concerned. So that basically all it can do really is just be storage. And we can go in and look, but I don't know that we can manipulate the data in there at all.
I think at least my understanding is we would not be able to collaborate on the platform as some people do and edit in line and that sort of thing. But we could share finished documents, even editable documents that somebody could then download, modify, and send back as a separate version. And then, what I've done in the minutes in the past as well is if there is a document that hasn't been posted to the town website, I PDF it, actually put it in my own OneDrive account and just link to it because it's like, very small file. It'll be there forever anyway. And it effectively becomes a public document. So we could use it for that purpose as well, for sharing documents that we would link to in the minutes. So for whatever that's for.
Okay, John?
Is the $6 per month per person, is that discounted if you get everybody who's in town government to sign in, or are we just talking about the FinCom? And secondly, is there I'm unfamiliar with SharePoint, unfortunately. Is there some way that I could get online and kick the tires without paying $6?
Yeah, you can, OneDrive, you can go for free. You can set up an account.
OneDrive quite a bit.
Yep, and then SharePoint, if you Google SharePoint, there's tutorials and overviews of what it does.
Okay.
The UI, John, the UI is actually pretty similar to OneDrive. But I will, if you want, I'll take it offline. I can actually share some folders from my account, I think, with you. I have one for work and just kind of orient you that way because you can publicly share documents and I think you can even edit them and manipulate them through the file.
What I'll do is I'll get online and I'll start to just look at SharePoint a little bit. Then I'll, as soon as I get overwhelmed, I'll call you. So I'll probably call you tomorrow morning.
You're always take your call.
All right, well, in the meantime, I think it might be, all right, so none of the file sharing options have a limit. Okay, so with OneDrive, if we create a OneDrive folder, and it doesn't matter what the type of document is that's uploaded there, is that correct? It doesn't have to be a Microsoft document, it doesn't have to be?
No.
Okay. Because it might be worth going ahead and starting with that and seeing how much we do tend to use it or not. And if we start to hit the point where we're before we move into SharePoint, what I'm not sure of is, I know one of the concerns was around security, but I'm not sure that security would be an issue. I can't remember what some of these discussions were.
Yeah, I think half the battle here. So the original discussion was a shared credentials, which was the security issue that I raised is very problematic. I think that's been more or less arrested, and whatever we do, we'll have our own credentials for this. And I think you can set up a OneDrive such that you can share access and people can create their own login to that OneDrive from their account. The problem, as Chris explained, is, for those of us who are standardized on Microsoft for both work and personal accounts, this would be yet another Microsoft login using, I would assume, our town email as our credential into a Microsoft account using the same personal and work computers that we all use. And so that could turn into a usability issue, if not a security issue. Probably not a security issue, but definitely a usability challenge.
Oh, God. Well, yeah. Well, especially for me. I mean, I have 2 Microsoft Teams, and I don't even know how I got a second one.
There you go.
It's crazy. So it's, I don't do much with either of them. but at work, yeah, it's been a nightmarish. So I'm happy to proceed with if somebody wants to take a shot at starting something. But I think the share file or is it share file?
There's OneDrive and SharePoint.
SharePoint, okay. Does the SharePoint eliminate that problem in terms of because it's not a Microsoft? product.
It's also in Microsoft, but I think it's more centrally managed, more so than kind of remotely managed, giving permissions. At least that's how it is with the SharePoint that I use.
Okay.
So there's more of an administrator. You would request someone to be added to, say, the FinCom page, and they could be added. You could probably even have a public page where certain documents get pushed out into, public access that anyone could access. It does seem like at some point, and I don't know all the records management for the town, but if they could go to digital records management via this mechanism, we may be able to even save on storage of files. If we did it, if we started to build this up and across the, our enterprise.
I'm getting into history that I'm kind of foggy on, but I did have some conversations with Mr. Maladrinos about this a year or two ago, and I seem to recall we were using a municipal records management system and still have one in place just for internal use. But for the purposes like public committees and even the school department, we're standardized on Google as a town. For one reason in particular, which is the price. But I don't know that that's something that we don't want to revisit or not. I don't know.
Yeah, the only other issue I had when I set up my OneDrive with my Lunenburg online account is it did get frozen and tagged, and they had to review it because I think I put my same cell phone number on multiple accounts now. So I think it's almost saying, is this really being used correctly? So I don't know all the issues surrounding that as well.
Google will do the same thing if you're using the same cell phone for multiple Google accounts.
Yeah, I couldn't even set it up at all with my Lunenburg Online on the Google.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, but once you get it set up, if you put in your phone number and it recognizes your phone number as attached to another Google account, it'll seek to sort that out.
So personally, I don't know how others feel. I think it's good to have them all these documents in one location. It becomes very easy to access. You can download them onto your iPad. I was actually in the car reading them as as Karen was driving. So it gives you the ability to look at documents, everywhere you are because it's cloud-based. And we're all working off the same document at that point.
Yeah, I have no problem with pursuing it. Well, I do have a problem with pursuing it. The only problem I have is that I am technologically inept. If somebody wants to take the lead on something, trying something out, then I'm happy to hop on board. And in the meantime, we can have a discussion about whether or not the town is interested in pursuing this as a town. Beyond.
I think it's a worthwhile thing to pursue, and I'm happy to be involved, or Chris, let you run with it. I would only ask that we do this with, if not the blessing, the coordination with Mr. Maladrinos, just for continuity's sake. So there's somebody at the town who has backup credentials or an account that, should one of us get hit by a bus or quit or whatever, we still maintain control.
Yep, and I did reach out to Steve Malandrinos, and he's the one that pointed me in these options, and he said he was more than willing to help to set up anything or get people involved. So.
Good.
Yep.
All right. Well, Chris, do you mind continuing to run with this?
Sure.
Thank you. All right. So you're going to be busy. So, all right. So in 2 weeks, you'll be discussing rubrics and technology. So here we go.
Yeah, and it would be good to get town manager's opinion on, whether she wants to do it this way.
Okay. Then we'll bring that back again for board discussion. But in the meantime, if there's, I'll try to see what documents I can find on that you've talked about tonight. to send on to both you and to Heather Soroka.
I've got a lot of that in my OneDrive too, Terry, so I can dig that out. At least the
Actually, if you wouldn't mind doing this, and then just sharing those documents with Chris and Heather, that would be awesome.
all right.
Thank you.
I just have to go back through all of my emails to find them. So, see, I'm so technologically sound here that I can't even find the agenda again. All right.
Public comment.
We're at public comment. Does anybody have any public comment from the board? Dave Passios.
Yeah, a couple of things I left out earlier. First of all, a little addition to the Parks report. If anybody's been over to Wallace Park in the last week or two, the basketball court resurfacing capital project is now complete with just a few more touches to be done, touch-ups around the edge outside of the court itself. That DPW is going to finish up a little bit of hot top repair towards the snack shack, so on and so forth. I haven't been over there to physically see it. The DPW director did post a couple of pictures to the park commissioners, and it looks fantastic. So one capital project that is complete. And from a budgetary point of view, the resurfacing dollar amount was exactly the amount that was appropriated for the capital project. And then there was $7,000 that was encumbered from the parks budget from 2020 to cover the fence work, which was about $7,000. The fence work was done first, but the numbers just work out that what was appropriated actually was the actual cost of the resurfacing. Lastly, I haven't got all of the details on this, and I was on with town council on Wednesday, and he gave me kind of a confusing answer, but the town charter has cleared the legislature. The last I saw was it was on the governor's desk, and I've heard that something was in the newspaper within the last 4 or 5 days, and I don't know what that article or the mention of it said, but we are in any case, we are very close to the charter being finalized and in place. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Peter?
Just a question for Dave on the on that money that was encumbered in the Parks Department. Shouldn't that require a transfer request if we're encumbering town department budget to then supplement a project that was on the capital plan?
That would be a good answer, good question for Karen, but she did cover that in my back and forth with her, saying that rather than transferring capital money between projects within the capital plan, in a few instances, they've covered overages on capital plan projects by encumbering available money in a department's line item that would otherwise roll to free cash. So,
Actually,
there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I don't disagree with what you're saying, Peter, but it's when you start to question these things with outside of the powers to be, especially if you go to the Attorney General's office or anything to do with the state, they just say, well, unless it's egregiously out of whack what they're doing, if that's been common practice, they're not going to fight it.
The problem is,
Peter, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question so that I can follow your discussion. Was the fence work part of the capital plan?
I would have to go back and read the exact wording of the capital plan, but I believe it was for improvements and resurfacing of the basketball court. I'm pretty sure that's the way it was worded, so that's why the fence was also included.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry, Peter.
Yeah, I appreciate if Karen has a comment or she knows. If not, if we could inquire from the town manager what the story is on this. I understand. I don't think there's anything untoward here. The problem is that if the regulations specify that money that is in a budgetary capacity to operate the department requires a transfer to move it to a capital function, and there's no harm, no foul, and people do it anyway, well, sooner or later, there might be harm and there might be foul, and people are going to do it anyway. And so, in my humble opinion, if this is a process that we are not following, then I think we should be following it.
I just want to clarify, the funds aren't actually transferred to the capital article. The expenditure is split so that whatever was in the capital article is expended out of capital, and the balance that's not available in the capital article is expended from the park department's operating budget in the general fund. So there's no physical transfer of funds to the capital accounts.
I understand that, Karen, but I don't recall seeing in the 2020 budget fencing as something that the Parks Department was looking to spend money on as part of their budget.
I agree with that.
So
they do have a line item in their budget that's pretty general that just says Park Department expenses. So, I mean, I guess,
all right.
So was the difference in money just for the fence?
Pretty much so, but like I say, the fence happened first, that's all.
Because I know we repair fences all the time under operating budgets. I mean, the fences are always getting broken or not dangerous or whatever across all of our parks.
Correct.
Right, it happened at
And
Town
that
Beach.
comes out of the parks budget on a yearly basis whenever it's done.
But there's a difference between a repair and a replacement.
Well, there's also a difference between the cost of the project, and that's what makes it a and that's why I was asking whether or not the fence was included as part of the capital plan project, or if it was just basically something that happened as it happens, because basically the cost of repairing a fence is not necessarily something that would show up in a capital plan. So, because it doesn't hit the threshold of the, to be a capital plan item.
So one thing it does too. Go ahead, Terry.
No, I was going to say that basically I understand the question in terms of going from an operating fund function to a capital function, and that there should be some sort of transfer there, because the capital plan is not voted on by the Parks Department. That's handled by a completely different authority. So it's an interesting question, and in terms of how it would show up as it's almost like an interdepartmental transfer rather than a departmental one, but in terms of the way the capital tends to be handled. So it's an interesting question. I think it's worth some future discussion, and I guess we can have that when Heather's here as well, and hopefully Karen can start that conversation with Heather in terms of in what situation would it come to a in what situation would we see a line item transfer, and should it be part of the closing of the fiscal year as one of the transfer items that's approved?
I just had one other question for Dave, and this has to do with the timing of the debt project. Just for everybody's information, I had mentioned at last week's meeting that I'm expecting to meet with the superintendent, Mr. Cassidy and Mr. Londa next week, although we don't have a time and date specific yet. We still have it tentatively on the calendar to discuss the Turkey Hill scoping. Dave, you mentioned that we'll begin to get some big ticket items hitting a ledger, I guess, at least, for TC Passios. Do you anticipate that those will be directionally of any value when it comes to scoping a final cost?
Only in the realm that, as the architects mentioned, the early numbers will be categories that no matter how we configure the building or what we just, how we decide to divvy up the building, those costs are going to be constant. So, it's like the roof structure, the basic infrastructure for heating and electricity, things like that. The committee was, excuse me, very cautious. There was a sentiment that we needed to start bringing numbers forward, but there was also a sentiment that we need to make sure that we bring forward numbers that are not going to change dramatically. Because very often the first number anybody hears is the number that goes to town meeting. That's kind of a vague answer. There were both sides of the fence within the committee. And the architects basically said that for the most part, the only numbers that will come forward are things that will not change throughout the project.
Is there a calendar that gets us to a more reliable number?
We kick that around a little bit. I would have to watch the meeting again to remember what we ended up with. I know we're going to be tied up, excuse me, a little bit with this round of municipal uses being vetted for the next couple of meetings at least. During that time period, the engineers and architects are going to be moving forward. So I don't foresee any numbers coming out within that time frame. So, and this isn't official, but I'm saying late September is the absolute earliest any numbers will come out. There was also talk of at some point, as these reports become a little bit more reliable, they will be posted, I believe, on our page, the committee's page, and be accessible to the public. And there is a push to get as much information out there available to be looked at as early as possible. Can I make, Terry, if I could, if we're done with that, I'd like to jump back just very briefly to our discussion we just had about the capital project. The only other thing that it does long-term, paying for that project the way it was paid for, is it skews the historical data of what the actual capital project cost was. Does that make sense?
Right.
Because $7,000 was taken from somewhere else. So you won't see that in a single number associated to that capital project, except maybe deep in the accounting that Karen would be aware of.
Okay. But it's also possible that if the court was not repaid, that the fence may have been improved anyway.
Correct.
Okay. So, which is one of the things that and again, that's where it gets to me in terms of was that part of the capital project, and I don't know. So that's where it probably becomes questionable what can be. But it would be good to be able to have a true sense of what was actually spent. Jay, did I see your hand go up?
Yes, I just had a public comment. I would encourage you guys to go watch the Board of Assessors July 13th meeting. It's only about 20 minutes long. And the only reason I bring it up is I happened to watch it, and they were clarifying the new primary assessor person. I forget what the exact job title was. But one of the issues that came up using that somehow I think has something to do with the state procurement process that a lot of towns are using. And the discussion was that the software wasn't very user-friendly and didn't have very good tech support. And then they seem to be concerned about running two systems for getting out the next tax bill, which can cause the tax bills to be late and they cause other snowball other issues because of that. And I was hoping the town manager was going to be on here to maybe follow up and give us more information on that, because I think issues like that should be brought to at least to our attention, even Board of Selectmen attention, to be aware of when you have software issues like this that then cause administrative nightmares and cause other issues. I know they talked about 2 other companies that they were either using or had used that they liked a lot better than whatever the state program. I don't know if they have to use it or what the situation is. And I don't know if Karen has any information on it, but it's something I
don't have a lot of information
what
on
they're
it.
doing. I think they had a meeting on August 10th regarding that I did.
I know
Yeah.
that we have the
Everybody's
CAMA
broken.
system. We need to change the CAMA system and go to new software. We actually entered into a contract with it's a Tyler product, which is the software that the whole town uses right now, but it was an assessing software. The name of it was IAS World. And I know that the conversion isn't complete yet, but
Yeah.
what has been converted, they've had several issues with, and we've been notified by the state that there were issues and that we could potentially face having to do preliminary 3rd and 4th quarter bills if the situation wasn't cleared up. I know our principal assessor is working on everything now. I don't really want to talk about it too much because I know that our legal counsel is also involved with this, because one of the things that the new assessor wants to do is make a switch from the software that we were supposed to be going to something else. So, like I said,
Okay, so,
council's involved, and I don't want to really get into any details with it, but hopefully the issue will be resolved and we won't have any issues with certification of our rate or anything like that.
okay. So, but if anybody does want to have any questions about it, Jay, you said the meetings were July 13th and August 10th?
Correct. I haven't watched the August 10th yet, but I know the discussion about the software was under for that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, once, twice. Okay, that's it. You're gone. There's nothing in the email. So with that, I will, on the next meeting is September 10th. We have a full agenda for that night. And again, so we'll have the meeting minutes from July 23rd, August 13th, and we'll see about whether we have the minutes for tonight. But and then we'll have the discussion, further discussion around the budget after the Tuesday night meeting, and I'll encourage people to watch the Tuesday night Board of Selectmen meeting for the budget priorities in the close of the fiscal year. And we'll discuss the rubric development and the share file, not share file, the other one. And
You sound like Bill Belichick.
With that, I will be happy to accept the motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn at 8:24 p.m.
I second that.
Okay, then I have, I heard a couple of seconds. So I'll have, Jay has the second there. So all in favor, John,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Jay,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you, everyone, and have a great couple of weeks. See you in a couple.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.